So do you remember the Last of Us Part 2 multiplayer mode that was then eventually spun off into a dedicated game called, it was just Last of Us Online was all we really knew about it. We got some artwork for it, but we never saw any gameplay. We did see some like allegedly leaked like screenshots. Like, I don't know. I mean, fam, do you think this looks real? Like, for one, her hand kind of looks like it has an extra joint in it. And also the window is really weird. I don't get this angling. Like, it looks like it's an in progress, in development like shot, but it just looks weird, man. I don't know. This hand is also really, really tiny, but this hand is big. The font is right, but I just don't know, man. It looks funky to me. I don't buy it. But this game was in the works from Naughty Dog for years and years. It seems like it started even like well before the launch of The Last of Us Part 2, and it maybe started as an online mode like Last of Us Factions, but eventually spun off into its own thing. And they worked on it for years and years and years, and then it was shut down out of nowhere. Well, the game director left Naughty Dog shortly after all of that happened, and just recently sat down and did an interview with Lance E. Lee on the whole process and what he learned and all of this stuff. And I'm going to link you this interview if you are interested so that you can listen to it and see what you think. As you can see, it's pretty massive. There's a lot going on here, but a few different outlets have taken this, clipped it, and discussed some of the key points which were most interesting. The first group to clip parts of it was Kotaku. So shout out to Kenneth Shepard for this. But as you can see, it's just been under 3 years since Naughty Dog announced it was canceling the planned Last of Us multiplayer game in order to redirect its resources to its signature single-player narrative titles, including the upcoming PS5 game Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. From the sound of it, the multiplayer game was in the late stages of development when the studio pulled the plug. Bear in mind, this was rumored to be very, very close to launch. When they canceled it, they said in a public statement it was because they realized that they would basically have to become a live service support studio, and that would not only affect, but probably preclude them from doing single player games in the future. In short, they realized if we do The Last of Us Online, and God forbid it's successful, we will have to put all resources into new content, new seasons, stuff like that. And that means we're not making single player games anymore. And that's why they said they had to cancel it, which is confusing because you'd think that they would have known that before they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it. But anyway, Vinit Agarwal, the director on the project, who has since left Naughty Dog and moved to Japan to found a new studio, sat down for a lengthy interview with Lance E. Lee to talk about his life and career. When the topic of The Last of Us Online came up, Agarwal revealed that the game was around 80% complete before it was canceled. Woof. Agarwal also gave some insights into Sony's misguided live service pivot, which he says the company started pushing around 2020 at the beginning of their COVID era, or COVID-19 pandemic era, as online games became a way for people to connect with their friends while quarantined in their homes. As restrictions have loosened in the years that followed, people aren't playing online games as much as they were, and as such, all of that investment into forever games was pulled back. The combination of that and weighing of Naughty Dog's internal resources led to The Last of Us Online's cancellation. What he said was, quote, basically at one point a decision was made. Okay, make this game or make the next game that Neil Druckmann was directing, the president of the company. And so, kind of naturally, you can understand what happened there. They had to pick the game that was kind of the bread and butter of the studio rather than this experimental game that I was working on that I believed was going to be really big. But unfortunately, couldn't see the light of day. That was a devastating moment for me because I spent 7 years working on that game and it was soul crushing. He said The Last of Us Online was in development for 7 years. 7 years. Now, to be fair, a lot of these games start with small teams of like 10 people, 15 people, and then grow up from there. They grow to, 100 people, 200 people after that point. But they start in pre-production very, very early on like that. But to hear that this game was in development for 7 years is crazy. Bear in mind, this is also the same story for like Horizon Hunter's Gathering, where I think Jor told us the game director on that game has been assigned to it since like, I think it was something crazy, like 2019. So he's also been working on it forever. And so, you know, these live service games, they start very, very early on and they take for freaking forever. So first he said 2020, now he says 7. Well, I think what happens is that you do very, very early pre-production stuff with a very like small team or even just him. And then he pitched it to the executives and then they greenlit it fully. So I think they were working on the online mode before The Last of Us Part 2 launched, and that launched in 2020, in June of 2020. And then he pitched doing a much bigger version of the online mode, spinning it off into its own thing. And they were like, okay, yeah, let's try that. And that's why he says it started in 2020. But I think he was working on it before that, when it was originally just going to be like an online mode for The Last of Us Part 2. If that makes sense. He continues, I remember honestly finding out that it was getting canceled 24 hours before it was announced to the public. The game director found out it was canceled a day before. That sucks, dude. That's how I found out about the game getting canceled. And it was just unfortunate. And they had to do that because they have to control the messaging. So even the game's director found out 24 hours beforehand. That's crazy. That's crazy. For now, Naughty Dog is working on Intergalactic. Druckmann keeps teasing that there's more Last of Us coming down the line. It's been 6 years since The Last of Us Part 2, which is nearly as long as it was between the first and second game. Oh my God, dude. I didn't even think of that. Wait, dude, that's upsetting. That just broke my brain. Flashbang, get ready. Timeline. 2013, The Last of Us launches. 2016, Uncharted 4 launches. 2020, TLOU2 launches. It is now 2026 and we still have nothing. So the time, that's upsetting, dude. That's freaking upsetting. So it's more like this, if this is our timeline, that this is 2020. This is, we'll say 27 when we probably get Intergalactic, okay? But this is The Last of Us 2, Uncharted 4, and then The Last of Us 1. And it's just been a massive gap. That's upsetting, dude. That's crazy. Like seriously, the post-COVID era of development has just plummeted. It seems like productivity is way lower. I don't know if that's work from home that's caused productivity to be super low or what. Obviously, to a certain extent, it's also like wasted dev time on a live service game that never launched. So like this Last of Us Online probably would have launched in like 24, but now it'll never see the light of day. But so they would have had it broken up more, but it's just so frustrating to see a studio like Naughty Dog that goes this long with nothing. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing. Oh yeah, they did the Last of Us 1 remake. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, it's the same energy as when I just saw, I think it was in Mortismal's interview with Todd Howard, when he was like, basically asking, what is the deal with games taking this long? Like, it's been so long since you revealed The Last of Us, Elder Scrolls 6 and all this. It's been ages. And Todd is like, yeah, well, we're doing more than ever before. We've got 67 updates for Fallout 76. And we've also released more individual games in the last decade than ever before. And it's like, bitch, if you count every remaster, anniversary edition, re-release that is not really quantifiably different in any perceivable way, yeah, I guess you can inflate your numbers, but like, are you really going to claim that? Like, are we really going to say that? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing? Last of Us Remastered was a big project. Well, I think Last of Us Online or Last of Us Remastered, I forget who said it, but they said that it was something where new hires were assigned to it. So like, before you worked on Intergalactic, you had to do, or you were working on the remaster, remake, whatever. And so it was kind of like how you learn the tools and how you learn the team and how the company worked. And once you did your work there, you can move on to the big project. But it was basically, as far as I can recall, it was used as like a training ground. So it was a lot of work, but it's not like their A team was working on that stuff. It seems like it was more onboarding, because it's pretty straightforward. The game exists, just replace assets and tweak this stuff here and there. It's not like a total overhaul, but Yeah. Anyway, it's absolutely mind blowing. As you can see, the final recap, Cammy went through the full interview and found some interesting tidbits. So Last of Us Online multiplayer was around 80% complete before it was canceled. In development for 7 years, at least he worked on it for 7 years. Supporting Last of Us multiplayer was full time and would have taken resources away from single player titles. Funding dried up after the pandemic since people weren't gaming online as much. Specifically, it seems like there was some point, probably circa 2023, going into 2024, when Jim Ryan was on his way out and it was clear that the live service push was not working the way they thought it would. They thought they'd just be able to pump out live service games and make tons of money, and it did not work that way. So money started to dry up. Vinit stayed at Naughty Dog for another year as game director for a new single player game, not Intergalactic. So he stayed there for another year working on something. Naughty Dog had at least 2 single player games in development when Factions was canceled: Intergalactic and something else. That something else has been rumored for years to maybe be a spin-off Uncharted game. It's been rumored maybe it's going to be the next chapter of The Last of Us. We don't really know, but I'm sure we'll find out at some point. Factions 2 sounded like an Extraction style experience where you fight other teams for resources inspired by real events. I don't know what that means. Inspired by real events, like, I don't know what that means. Sorry for people listening in the right ear set. The audio is messed up, so it's only coming out of the left.
Honestly, finding out that I was the director of the game, and to find out that was getting canceled 24 hours before it was announced to the public, that's how I found out about the game getting canceled. And it was just unfortunate. And they have to do that because they have to control the messaging. And
did that hurt you more than being walked out of the office with your box?
10 times more. Because this is something.
So you had
this is something I really cared about.
Yeah, but you had so much invested in 7 years of investment.
And you remember I was telling you.
Investment, yeah.
Remember I was telling you that what inspired me about the games of the '90s was they came from a core inspiration of something from outside of games. I had a core inspiration for this game that drove what happened in the game. So in 2012, I was visiting my my friend in Austin, Texas, and I was out late at night with one of my other friends who was also visiting with me, and we're coming back late at night. And I was on the phone at 3 in the morning with my girlfriend at the time, and I had like a camera hanging from my neck. I was like a adult tourist. 2 guys show up behind us with shotguns. And I turn around, and these guys are pointing shotguns at our faces.
This is serious?
Real.
In New York?
In Austin, Texas.
In Austin, Texas, okay.
But another thing happened in New York, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
And they're like, empty your pockets.
Okay.
Yeah. And my buddy starts running. I'm like, he starts running. I look behind me. These guys are pointing shotguns at me. Like, empty your pockets.
And he ran, and you just stood there and said, okay.
Because I was an idiot. I was on my phone. I had no clue what was going on. Like, empty your pockets. And I couldn't quite understand what they're saying because they had this southern accent.
Right.
So I started running, actually, because I don't know what they want. Or I thought they were going to shoot me. So I started running. And as I'm running, they tripped me with their shotgun like a hockey stick.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, as like they were running behind me, they tripped me with like a shotgun with a hockey stick.
And you fell on your face.
And I fell on my face, and they're like, "Empty your fucking pockets," you know. And I was like, "Okay." And I dropped my camera, I dropped my phone, I dropped everything, and they're like, "Get the fuck out of here!" And I was like, "Okay." And I ran, and I found my friend, and we flagged down a car, and we called the cops.
So, dude, what the hell? Dude, if my buddy just took off when we're being held up, I'd be like, we need to talk about this, buddy. What was that? Like, I don't think I'd be that calm.
And they couldn't do anything about it because those guys are already gone.
Your friend, was he Indian too?
No, he was my college buddy. He was a white guy from who we worked on the game together in college. He was one of my.
And he just left you.
Maybe there's broader context I missed. It seems kind of weird to ask if your friend was Indian as well. Like, is that not kind of an out-of-pocket question? Like, what? I guess he's insinuating maybe the robbery was racially motivated, but like they approached him from behind. How would they know what race they are? I don't know. It's kind of a weird question.
The flight, right? That was the kind of moment. And, but it was a true moment of like you felt like you were going to die, you know?
Of course, yeah.
And so that was like a frightening moment where it felt, and the thing that was sad about it was these guys were holding up a shotgun point for what at the end of the day? They got my wallet that had like 30 bucks in it. Yeah. You know what ended up happening? They used my credit card once at McDonald's, then they tried to use it at Walmart and they got rejected, and then they ditched it. And the phone was shattered because I dropped on the floor when, you know, a homeless guy called my brother on my phone, and we got my phone back the next day. They tossed it in a dumpster, you know. And so what did they really get out of that whole engagement? Maybe like a McDonald's meal. Like really, that's what they got out of that engagement. And yet they did it because they were desperate, I presume.
And so that's like part of his inspiration for the game is like that desperation, what it pushes you to do. I can see that. Yeah, real life trauma can definitely inspire things creatively. I mean, that's the title of this chapter of the video. Real life trauma inspires game design. That makes sense. He then tells another story about it in something similar that happened in New York. And yeah, I think it's just fascinating to hear all of the inner workings of this stuff. And it just sucks that you work on something for 7 years and they'll fire you and shut the whole thing down because like, yeah, we just realized this is going to be expensive. You know, like, oops, just realized it. Why is the video unlisted? I genuinely don't know. I don't know. I will share it with you guys in chat right there if you want to see it and check it out yourself. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing. I think it's a fascinating story, but as you can see, Vinit now has his own studio in Japan making a gritty and mature 90s anime style game. So he moved to Japan, started a new studio, and that's what they are working on. But I think that this project, honestly, it probably would have done fine, but I think what we've seen, even with like Marathon, you can have industry leading talent that works on a game like this for years and years and years, as they did with Marathon. And it'll find probably a devoted fan base of a handful of thousands of players. Marathon sold over 1 million copies, according to Alinea Analytics. And like, it's done well by most metrics. The problem is they spent quadruple A money on it. And so doing well is not good enough. And that's the problem with modern live service stuff, is that like Sony, it can't justify spending this money on well enough. It can't justify spending hundreds of millions on a game that does pretty well. It needs it to do amazingly well to make up, exactly, Kino, it needs to make up a $200 million budget. Good enough just got way higher, you know, like strong performance for a niche live service game is probably having a devoted fan base of 20, 30,000 players. For an indie team, that would be a dream. But when you spend $200 million, that doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't. It doesn't. And you know, even if you sold 1 million copies and you get some of those people returning for months on end, that's not good enough anymore. It's just not. And that's why I've always said, like, yeah, Marathon's solid enough and it's got a devoted fan base and people that really like it. That's fine. Is it enough for Sony to be happy about it? That's a separate question, which I don't think it. I don't see how you could look at the numbers for Marathon and conclude that Sony's happy with it. Sony spent $3.7 billion on the studio. You think they're happy with only 1 million copies? No, like that's not anywhere near good enough for what they spent. But that's a separate question. With this, I think they probably realistically looked at it. And once the studio came to them, and Neil, the head of the studio, goes to them and says, guys, if we do The Last of Us multiplayer, that becomes the focus. That is what we're doing forever, realistically. And that means you don't get The Last of Us Part 3. That means you don't get Uncharted, the reboot. You don't get any of these games that get you awards and critical acclaim and sell really well and are cheaper to make. You don't get those anymore. And Sony decided, yeah, let's not do that. And so they canned it. Now, my personal expectation is that elements of The Last of Us multiplayer will probably be seen at some point. Maybe within Intergalactic, they have a fun, like, you know how they did with God of War, they did the Valhalla update mode where they added like the roguelike elements. Maybe what they do is that they do something like that for Intergalactic where they have like a multiplayer mode, kind of like Legends with Ghost of Yotei and Ghost of Tsushima. Maybe they do something like that where they recycle it because he says they had it 80% done. So why not? Like, why not find some way to use those systems and ideas? But time will tell. Anyway, it's an interesting little piece of information, and now we'll never know how it would have done. I do think when it would have released, if it were honestly like an extraction game, it could have done decently, but again, decent is not good enough for having like one of the biggest and most valuable studios in the world working on something for years and years and years. It's just not good enough. You gotta do more. So there you go. He took my thing. Red flag.